I am your guys' account manager at Intrust IT, Josh Reese, and it's been a while since we've done one of these cybersecurity trainings for you guys. I know when we first partnered with you a few years ago, our CEO Tim did one for everyone, but I think that's the last time, isn't it, Linda, that you guys had the cybersecurity training? Have you had it since then? I know there's some bits of videos and stuff like that, but quite a bit has changed. And for the group that isn't here today, I wanted to kind of single you guys out in particular because I wanted to focus on executive level HR employees and finance teams because of some incidents that we've encountered with some other clients and things like that to make you specifically aware of some things that the rest of the employee base typically doesn't have to worry about as much. So again, my name's Josh. There's going to be a lot of information. At any point you have any questions, don't hesitate to raise your hand, ask me, or get with me afterwards.
Did your beard grow that picture?
Quite a bit. I actually, after that picture was taken, I shaved it all off for the first time in 11 years. And discovered 3 chins I didn't have the first time around, so after that I just stopped altogether. So each of you should have this sheet in front of you. This is what we're going to be working based off of today. We're going to be spending most of our time in those top 2 rows that are geared kind of for business owners and the people that might not have as much technical experience, but deal in more of the financial areas and employee information areas, things like that. Then we'll touch base on down at the bottom of some of the general things that we'll go over with the rest of the as well. On the back of the sheet, there are links for a lot of stuff that we're going over today. Unfortunately, technology hasn't progressed to the point yet where we can click a link on a piece of paper and go to the website. So you're going to have to manually type that stuff in if you want to use it. And then I'll also send a digital version of it to Linda as well.
I scanned it in.
Okay.
I'll send it in.
So the point of today's meeting is to educate, motivate you, and maybe hopefully scare you just a little bit, since that is kind of the best motivator, is a little bit of fear. And to kind of segue into that, I just had probably the worst cybersecurity incident that I've encountered since I've been doing this, and probably that Intrust has encountered since we've been doing this at one of my clients about a month ago. They're a client that has had a history of security breaches and things like that that's ultimately led them to working with us more over the past several months, things like that. But they became aware in mid-July that between 3 employees of theirs, there were 4 distribution requests made against those 3 employees' 401k accounts that totaled $471,000, and they were all approved and went through, and these employees had that deducted from their funds. The only way they found out when they did was because the final employee that was hit, he checks his balance every month and realized that he was $250,000 short on his 401k balance and reported it to him, and then they found out that there were several others. We got their insurance involved and a forensics team, and the FBI is working with them, and we've been running logs and things like that. And over the course of the investigation of all of this, what we've discovered is dating back to January, they had several email compromises. They had about a dozen email accounts that credentials were taken, the mailboxes were actually accessed, and things like that. They then in February had an incident where their current network administrator at the time, he's no longer with the company, hadn't been patching some of their servers and also didn't have antivirus on about a third of their servers. So one of their servers that wasn't patched hadn't been patched in about 2 years and had a vulnerability for something called internal blue, where it's a virus that spreads laterally within a network. So it doesn't target the computer that gets it if it's patched, but it scans the network to see if anything on the network isn't patched for that vulnerability, and then it just bounces back and forth between items that don't have that. And that in particular looks for items that have kind of payment information, bank routing information, things like that that are on the network. So what we discovered is that there were, as part of this compromise, what happened was there's a fact sheet that their 401k company, third party, has where you fill out name, birthday, social security number, and the withdrawal amount on this, and you sign it, and you fax it to them. On the bottom, it has the fax number, the phone number, everything like that. For these 3 employees, it was faxed to them, along with a voided check and a bank account that was open in these people's names. One bank account was in San Francisco, one was in Missouri. And then the person that was responsible actually called the 401k company as well to verify that the request was received and to check on the status of it. Their internal process then at that point apparently was for the 401k company to email that request to my client's HR department. And my client's HR department apparently didn't have a process of verifying these with the employees. All of the employees were over 59 and a half, so eligible for the distributions, things like that. And they just went and blindly approved them, and it was withdrawn. Turns out that there is only one location where a lot of the information could have come from. We think that whoever had it probably knew how much was in these accounts based on the amount that was requested for withdrawal. Typically, if somebody's taking a shot in the dark, they're not going to try to withdraw $250,000 from somebody's 401k unless they know there's that much in it. So there's really only one location where socials, birthdays, signatures, and the amounts were, and that was in the 401k portal. Turns out that 4 of their HR employees share access to the one single admin account for the 401k portal. And in the past, when they've changed the password for that, they just emailed it to each other. And they've had email compromises, and they've had viruses that look for this type of information. So we can't be certain, but it's a pretty good line of evidence that that's where this ultimately came from. They've only recovered one of them so far, and the FBI did take the case, but that's a several weeks into months process of it. So best case scenario, 3 of their employees lost $471,000 that they're attempting to get back and essentially had their identity stolen. Worst case scenario, it could later on affect their entire company because if they access that admin portal, they have that personal identification information for 200 to 300 employees. So that is probably the worst one I've seen yet, which is why we've kind of targeted this group of people and employees so we can go over some specifics.
Is America involved in that?
Which who?
Is America?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
That's good enough.
And also, to be clear, we do not share an HR, Trans American law, we all have individual ones.
That's good. That's something I'll go over. So, this is in 2015 when we started doing these trainings, Tim and I. This is kind of a graphic representation of what these breaches look like. And you can see the size of the breach is the size of the bubble. As recently as last year, this is what it looked like. Essentially unreadable because so many companies are getting breached on such a large scale that it's hard to even keep track of. So this website, thatisbeautiful.com, actually had to redo their website so they could show it in a cleaner view to where you could actually read everything. And this is, as of February of this year, some of the largest level breaches that have taken place. So it's definitely something that is growing rapidly at all times. So for those of you that may not have been here the previous time we did this, or as a refresher, why is cyber activity in terms of breaches and things like that increasing at such a rapid rate? It's really been 3 big game changers over the past 5-6 years or so that have led to these increases in these. One of which is very, very easy for me to go online, and in a matter of minutes, I can spin up a server in Mall or Hong Kong or anywhere around the world that costs me virtually nothing a month and is not traced anywhere I am, and then I can use that as my base of operations. I can deploy software from that. I can use that in any kind of communication, things like that I'm doing, and if I start getting traced, I can shut it down in a matter of minutes as well, and they never know who I am or where I'm operating from. The other item is the onion router, otherwise known as the dark web. And the dark web is a web browser, essentially, essentially, that is secure, it's anonymous, and it was actually created by the United States government as a means for people in more lockdown parts of the world, such as North Korea or the Middle East, where the government controls communications and things like that a little bit heavier, a way for them to communicate with news agencies and outside governments in other parts of the world. Cyber criminals, however, discovered that this was available and have since used it as kind of a base of operations for them to do things untraceable as well. So one of the big first instances of this was Silk Road, which was a marketplace that was on the dark web where you could pretty much purchase anything you wanted: drugs, weapons, contract killings, bootleg merchandise. If you could think of it, you could purchase it on the Silk Road. And it was created by this individual who went by the name of the Dread Pirate Robbers. So if anybody has seen Princess Bride, Dread Pirate Robbers. And the kind of stereotypical view of hackers is just some guy in a hoodie in his basement typing away at blank screens of numbers and doing it. In reality, it's not far off that. You really just don't need the hoodie, because this Dread Pirate Robbers, Ross Ulbricht, he was a college student at the time, and he has since been sentenced to life in prison without parole because, much like the Dread Pirate Robbers and Princess Bride, for those of you who've seen it, he was planning on just passing that name on to someone else when he had made the money he wanted to make and was ready to get out of the game. So he was kind of training, grooming people underneath him to take over his business when he was ready to move on. Unfortunately, he got a little bit paranoid that they were going to try to oust him and he was going to be planted sooner than he wanted to be, so he used his own website to hire people to kill the people he was training. Turns out that the people that he was hiring to take out the assassinations were actually undercover FBI agents, so because they were onto him already, and he's now in prison for the rest of his life.
That's what you think. He's working for the CIA.
Or working for the CIA. So when we talk about the dark web, it's all these things that you guys encounter, such as credit card skimmers at gas stations and stolen identities and things like that. A good portion of the time, the people that are actually taking it aren't the ones that are using it. It's going into marketplaces like this, where for a certain amount of Bitcoin, you can purchase somebody's personal identification information or credit card numbers. And then they use that, and people buy a pack of them for $20 or $50 or things like that, and they use what they can use out of it as long as they can use it, and then gone. There's no trace on that transaction. Which gives us to the third biggest game changer, which was virtual currency, which is what really all these types of transactions. If any of you have ever seen any type of ransomware notification or anything like that, most of the time it's requesting payment in Bitcoin. That's the big rise of it. But it started out with money packs, things like that. A lot of the CEO fraud targets in iTunes gift cards or Google Play gift cards, things like that. Untraceable forms of currency that you can transfer, and it's not tied to any bank account, any person. It's random. It's tied to strings of data, and it makes it a lot harder to figure out who's actually purchasing these items for you. So as a massively scalable computing resources in the cloud, untraceable worldwide communications via the dark web, and virtual international currency are really why we're seeing this big boom in cybersecurity.
Is the dark web something like it's like a Pandora's box? Once they open that up, there's no way to like get it back in and kind of maybe shut down or put something on top.
Yeah, because it's really hard to regulate. Because there is a lot of good that comes from the dark web as well, in terms of being able to communicate with people in sensitive areas of the world and facilitate in noble ventures and things like that. The other aspect of it is there's no one government agency that's coordinating this. It's a worldwide thing, just like the internet, which it's hard to police the internet because you can't control all of it worldwide. You can control within your country and things like that. But since no one entity owns it and operates it, it's hard to regulate it. And since it works anonymously outside of the initial purview of the regulated side of the internet, it's virtually impossible to shut it down. So we really are in the midst of a cybercrime wave, and we go over this all the time. And from 1984 to present, this is what the increase in known variants of malware in the wild look like. You can see that from 1984 up until really about 2007, 2008, there was virtually no change. It was kind of the same few instances of it. But really in the past 10 years or so, you've seen it exponentially increase year to year. And in the last 10 years alone, we've gone from 12.4 million instances of malware in the wild to over 800 million. And this was as of like March of this year. So I would guess that's probably at 1 billion by now, instances of malware in the wild that have been registered in antivirus databases, things like that. And they're targeting small to mid-sized businesses. You guys do have a few hundred employees overall in different aspects of your environment between the hourly workers and full-time and full-in and here, but you're still kind of in that model. In the past, people would target large-scale corporations that were thousands and thousands of employees, and they tried to target them with ransomware that would encrypt all their files and hold them for these large sums of money. What they found out, though, is that it's actually much more lucrative in the long run to target small, mid-sized businesses in the dozens to hundreds of employees range. This is a study that was run that saw that in 2018, there was 8.5 million requested in terms of ransomware across all small mid-sizes, which is about 3,000 Bitcoin. The highest ransom that was actually paid was $935,000, and the average ransom demand was $116,000. So they're able to target these on a lot wider scale and kind of mass market these ransoms and phishing attempts and send it out to dozens and get a hit on one or two and make just as much money as they would if they spent time and resources dedicating to trying to take down a large-scale corporation that oftentimes has better security and doesn't have the same disaster recovery plans. Beasley is an insurance provider. So we want to arm you with some of this knowledge in terms of things that you can take a second look at, things that you can do to prevent Aristech from becoming a victim of something like this. So start out on your sheet here, educating your employees is one of the biggest items. That's why I'm here today. That's why I'll be here all day tomorrow with the rest of your company so that we can go over these types of things, because at the end of the day, you are being targeted. You've been targeted in the past. You guys, I'm sure, have all seen the emails that have come out instituting some more advanced email security and things like that, where some of your coworkers were compromised. Some of you in this room could have been compromised. Sometimes it just looks like an email from Scott asking for $1,500 in Google Play gift cards that he wants you to buy. But you are actively being targeted, and it's not a matter of when you get compromised or if you get compromised. It's a matter of when. And we do all we can to prevent it, but this stuff is always evolving, and sometimes it's evolving quicker than we can become aware. And sometimes it's not even tied to what we can do to protect you. Sometimes it's tied to you sitting in this room, because at the end of the day, we can put as much security measures in place in your organization, but the best and worst line of defense that you guys have are you sitting around this table right here and everyone else at the desk.
I take issue with calling it Dave.
It's a general cartoon. I didn't know. It usually makes it funnier when there's an actual Dave in the room. So you've seen your general kind of phishing attempts where you get an email that says, hey, I'm so-and-so, I see that you have just bought a building, or I see that you do this type of work. I have a job that I would like you to do. Here's a link to Dropbox where I have some files that I want you to review and let me know what we can do. These are trying to trick non-technical people to click a link and input credentials and get compromised. Sometimes those links have files attached that will want you to run a macro, which never, ever, ever run a macro. Ever run a macro. If you open a file and it says, do you want to enable a macro? Don't do it. If you do it, let Linda know immediately. If you open it up and it asks you and you didn't do it, let Linda know immediately just to be safe so we can run some scans and cleanups on your computer, because that's a big way that the crypto virus and things like that actually get deployed. And then also sometimes they'll just try to get your credentials and get you to log in, and then it'll be a page that looks like it's Dropbox or something like that. But if you do access that file and it does install the software, you'll typically get a screen that looks like this on your computer that lets you know, hey, all your files have been locked. And you have 3 days to pay me this amount in Bitcoin or else your files are gone forever. We've had a few instances where we have had to actually have people that have come to us versus this pay the ransom. I think there's been 3 instances. In 2 of them, they did get the files back and unlocked, but in the 3rd, they did not, because at the end of the day, you are ultimately dealing with criminals. There's no law that says just because you pay them to get your files back, they have to give you your files back, because they're extorting you in the first place. So you can't trust them. That's why good backup management is key. We monitor your backups daily for the server. Any files that live on there have hourly incremental backups that even if an encryption does take place, it's segregated so you can't encrypt those. And part of the OneDrive rollout that some of you have probably gone through already as well, those are being backed up by the same solution in the cloud as well. And as lucrative as the ransomware is, I mentioned that the fish tests are actually where it's going towards more. I'm seeing a lot less crypto virus and a lot more social engineering phishing attempt base. And Cisco actually ran this report. KnowBe4 is a great resource. They do fish testing, a lot of cyber training and things like that. Cisco ran this report last year that showed over a 3-year stretch that $5.3 billion were made from CEO fraud attacks, as opposed to $1 billion from ransomware. So those are when you're getting email compromises, and they are digging in, and I'll go over a little bit of what we've seen, and pretending to be someone within an organization, and they're contacting people you do business with. They're contacting people within the organization and trying to get funds rerouted, things like that, to ultimately steal money that way. And those can go undetected a lot longer. So this is a typical one that you guys have probably seen before, where the CEO or the CFO of the company looks like you get an email from them and it says, I need to take care of something financially really quick for me. I need you to wire some money to this account overseas or something like this. If you actually go in and look at the properties of it, you can see that it's not actually coming from that employee. It's coming from a random AOL address. It's very easy to spoof that. A lot of the time, they don't even spoof the email address. They'll just spoof the name, because I can go onto LinkedIn and in the next 30 minutes, I can probably find out who each of you are, what your work email address is, what your role in the company is, and what other people's role in the company is, so I know who to gear this for. And a lot of the time I can email addresses, things like that, or I can go to your website and see what your overall email address is and just try a couple different combinations and start sending these out. That's why we have these spoof headers here where there's any type of things like Constant Contact or MailChimp, things like that, where we do mailing from, that sends on behalf of our employees, for it to look like it, where it looks like it's coming from Chad Adams at InterestIT.com, but it's just designed to look that way. It flags it and says, hey, this is a spoof email. That way, we take a second look at everything, and then in the circumstances where it's not a service that we're actually using, we second guess those. You can also amend those into the email file where it says external sender instead of just showing up as forward, thank you, things like that. So that's always an option there to get you to take a second look. Fake phishing emails and fish testing is also another great one. We do that actively on you guys. We've had some mixed bag results, I think, in the past several months, which is part of what geared this as well. You guys aren't doing as well as you guys should as a company. And this is actually an item as well. Testing has shown that over a 12-month period, the initial baseline for companies where they ran against 372 different companies and a total of 300,000 individuals, that the initial baseline prone to phishing was 15.9%. After security training and fish testing and things like that, after a 12-month period, the susceptibility goes down to about 1.3%. So we do see a good trend in that market, but it's also tied to what action is taken when these things are available. So that's why we're getting cybersecurity training in now, and there may be some quizzes that are sent out and some additional training and things like that that go out to individuals based on who failed those tests in the next few months. Because really, they're happening every day. They're so large, they're hitting the front page of the Wall Street Journal and major news networks. You guys have probably seen and heard, if you listen to any of the local radio stations, stuff like that, local governments across the country are being targeted a lot lately in terms of municipalities and things like that. We support several on our end, so it's something that we've been kind of hyper aware of, but there's been in Georgia, I know there was one, and in a couple other parts of the country, there's been local municipalities that have been shut down for days as a result of ransomware and phishing attack.
There was a story on 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
About 3 companies that pay.
Yeah. So here's a real example that we see all the time, where you have a company, such as Aristech, that manufactures goods, and they sell those to big company. Big company pays that manufacturer for these, and somewhere along the line, an individual becomes aware of this relationship. It could be that you had been compromised in the past. It could be that they had been compromised in the past. And they create a dummy email account that they may purchase a domain that looks like aristech.com, but it's actually a 1 in the I or something like that. That at a quick glance looks like it's somebody, and they send an email based on what they've seen before that looks like the exact same payment routing information, things like that, to this other company. This other company gets that, and they receive it, and they don't think to call and verify via second means or anything like that, and they start routing money to this individual, unbeknownst to you, and this can go undetected for months. Depending on when each company is checking their books and things like that, and then it becomes a nightmare to figure out who's at fault, because you have to try to trace back who the breach happened with and when, and who's responsible for recouping these funds and things like that. One of the biggest forms of this was Ubiquity Networks, which is a technology provider, and they were hit and duped out of $46.7 million a few years ago. They actually had to file it with the SEC as a public-owned company, and to date, they've only recovered about $8.1 million of that. So it can cost companies a lot of money. These are the more benign ones that you'll see sometimes. This is one that we actually had internally, where one of our employees, Billy, received an email from Tim that said, "Hey, how are you doing? I have something I need you to do." Him and Tim were actually coincidentally working on some different kind of email flow and trigger things when this happened, so he wasn't fully sure, so he did reply to it, and the individual replied back and said, "Hey, I need you to purchase $1,200 in Apple gift cards and send them to me." Billy responded and said, "Hey, I can't get this taken care of," and then thought to walk over to Tim and ask him, "Hey, that wasn't you, was it? Because of the language and things like that, how this was being emailed back." But a lot of the time, just replying and getting replied, they try to sell the scam, and they try to they're monitoring these mailboxes, and they have dozens of them up at the same time, and they're just looking for responses. I like to have fun with them when I get them, because there's no harm in just replying and lead them on for a while, and you'll see when they get frustrated people stop responding. But they do try to sell the story.
Please don't do that.
They do try to sell the story. If you don't see an email signature or things like that, it's pretty easy to know that it's not somebody from your company that's actually sending the emails. But anything financial related at all like this, always look at the email address and make sure it matches the name. Even if it does, if you don't see an email signature, or you see a signature but it looks different than you know how your signatures come through, things like that, look at that and really take care and ask the person. I would rather somebody internally get mad at you for getting something to them 2 hours late than because you had to verify that it was a legitimate request than actually have something malicious get around it. So really the key is, and why I brought this group of people together first, is you really have to redefine and reassess some of your guys' internal processes, just to verify that you guys are being as secure as possible. Anything that deals with financial information, personal identifiable information, things like that, be wary of how you guys are transmitting to each other. Don't just send social security numbers, birthdays, things like that. It could be used to steal somebody's identity over plain text, unencrypted email to each other. Encrypt the emails. There's also a tag if you have a new message open up here. There's a assign policy button. You click that assign policy, and it drops down to this. You can choose a retention policy so that it actually gets deleted after a certain amount of time, and you can add more here. So you can, if you do need to send something like that, encrypt it, but also assign a policy to it that it deletes after a week. That way, it's not there in your servers. That way, if you guys do get compromised at a later time, then they're not finding that email in your sent items, your deleted items, things like that.
Question, go back to that. Can you set that up for, can you set that up as a folder role?
As a, like
Like I have emails that come in that I automatically convert to a certain folder. Can I set them up to delete automatically?
I believe you can.
Okay.
And also if you receive emails that have that type of information, just along those same lines, after you get that information, get them off there, because just because it was received encrypted and it's sent to you, you're the only one that has access to the mailbox, things like that. If it's in a mailbox anywhere and it gets compromised later on, people go through this mail. It's not uncommon for people to actually get your credentials and get in your mailbox and be in there for weeks and not do anything. They don't send any email from you. They don't do anything like that. They're going through and they're looking for flags on payment information, mail routing, payment routing, things like that, and they're compiling information. I've seen it where we've had people that they get compromised and then eventually the spam goes out. But what ends up happening is months later, they get notifications from one of their clients that they're getting spam from. Turns out it's not actually coming from them. What's happened is these people have exported their contact list, they've copied their signature, and they've created a third-party mail account on a purchase domain that looks close to theirs, using their name, and they're sending the same emails that these people send people. They're resending some invoices just with updated payment information, things like that, and at a quick glance, it looks real. So it's just because the compromise happened 6 months ago doesn't mean that something won't happen as a result of it months down the line. So always get that key information out of your mailbox when you can. If you need to scan a document that has like a driver's license or something like that, make sure you're scanning it to a secure network folder on your network that only you or only select people that need to access that are seeing. That way you don't run the risk of it being transferred via email and then somebody seeing that attachment, they compromise your mailbox, things like that. A big one as well that I'm recommending to people is to communicate to clients and vendors how financial information and updates will be made. This is a big one because, like I said, it doesn't have to be your company that gets compromised for you to lose money. it could be somebody that you do business with could have an email compromise, and you guys aren't touched at all, but in there they see an email invoice from somebody in this room or somebody in your company, and they resend that email using that name on a third-party email address to that employee with different payment information, and rather than the money coming to you like it should, it's going to somebody else. And you guys have no idea until you guys are into your collections flow with your clients asking why they haven't paid in 6 months. They're like, oh, we've been sending the money, here's the receipts and things like that, but it's going to a third-party bank account. So it doesn't have to be tied to anything on your side.
Whoopsie, 6 months.
but what I'm recommending is probably every 6 months or quarterly if you guys want, but I would say probably every 6 months or so, just so you can capture if people have changeover in staff, things like that. Send a notice to anybody that you do business with where finance transactions are in place, and come up with a process of how you will notify them if there's any type of bank account routing changes or updates like that, and put a kind of a two-factor policy in place and let them know that whoever their point of contact here is will reach out to the point of contact there to notify them of the change, maybe via email first, but that also we will reach out via phone call and confirm as well, and make sure they know that if they receive any type of notification like that, that there's been a change in routing information, things like that, that appears to affect one of your guys' accounts, to call their point of contact here and verify that via phone as well, just so that they're taking a second look as well, because you can't control what other companies are doing and other individuals are doing, but you can at least try to spread some of that knowledge on and come up with a policy internally here that lets everyone know if we are going to change our routing information or payment terms or anything of the nature, this is the process. Make it multi-phase, multi-verification. That way, it lessens that risk of them getting that on one of yours. And again, just exchange the information securely. The encrypted emails, don't send passwords, don't share passwords. If you guys do have admin accounts to third-party stuff, such as 401k providers or benefit providers, anything like that, get individual accounts with the needed access for each individual. That way you aren't sharing passwords and updating passwords, emailing them to each other, things like that. So again, educate your employees as part of Interest Orange Jacket cybersecurity training. And if you guys want to know more, Credit Zone Security is good for those of you that are more technically inclined. That is probably good for Linda, that has updates on the latest breaches and hacks and things like that. So you can subscribe to that. And Clark Howard is really good for more banking related things like that. So those of you that are in the financial realm, if you want to subscribe to that, it does a lot, provides tips and tricks and things like that, which leads us more into the financial side of things and securing your bank accounts. Two-factor authentication. If your banking provider doesn't offer two-factor authentication, then you need to get it. If they don't offer it, you need to get a new banking provider. That goes for personal and business both these days. Really, any vendor that does 401k, HR, benefits, anything that has personal information for your employees, payroll, anything like that, speak with them if you don't already have multi-factor authentication on those accounts, especially ones that have admin access to see that information for employees, and ask them if they have it available. If they don't have it available, ask them if they have a plan to get available relatively soon, and if they don't, then you probably need to start shopping around for somebody else to move that into. It used to be little key fobs that would be multi-factor authentication, as you guys have probably started to see with what we're rolling out with 365. Now it's phone app. That a lot of your personal banking apps sometimes will have, like mine, I use my fingerprint on there and my phone fingerprint reader. That's how I get in, and it doesn't let me log in if I don't have that. But then I have a text message or a app, or I try to access a little bit. this is another real life example that we'll see sometimes is you have a small business bank account and you have a vendor that has an ACH pool from that small business, and somebody compromises that vendor and sees they get into that banking website and they see that ACH pool and they adjust it and they change what account that goes to and the amount of it that happens. And all of a sudden, that's going through. We actually had it one time where we had a vendor of ours that it was an accident, had put another zero on it, and a $4,500 ACH pool turned into an attempted $450,000 ACH pool. So it's not always just malicious. Sometimes it's accidental things like that. So speak to your bank about some of the features they have. ACH positive pay, where you can kind of delegate different clients or vendors that are allowed to pull money from you and the amount they're allowed to pull. That way, if a larger amount goes or it gets changed routing, it gets flagged and you guys get notified. Check positive pay, where you guys know who's allowed to actually cash checks from you guys, and then you know when somebody's trying to cash fraudulent checks from you. We had a client as well where they worked with a third-party vendor of ours that we recommend quite a bit, and they had some fraudulent checks that were written in the name of the owner of their company. It had signature, it had bank account information, everything like that, and they reported it to the police. They started investigating. They actually ended up catching the guys. As part of the evidence that they found when they captured the guys is they found several checks that were all written to the company we do business with that were stolen essentially from the mailbox of that company. Because what these people were doing were they were going around to local businesses in the area and stealing the mail and looking for checks and then writing fraudulent checks to this company, just to a different bank account. So things like that, check positive pay will prevent that because it's not going to the approved bank account, approved location there. If your banking provider hasn't talked to you about some of these security measures, talk to them about it, see what they offer. Huntington Bank's a really good one that offers it. Chase also offers a lot of the same things. You can also set up similar items on your personal accounts as well. You probably don't have much of the ACH and things like that, but you can apply some of the same verification, things like that, verification payments as well. I get text messages for every transaction that happens on my debit card so that I know when it happened. A little bit annoying sometimes, but at least I know if something odd comes up, it flags. Also, there's ones that you can do where if you leave a tip at like a restaurant or something like that, verified they didn't have it. So definitely talk to your banking rep about some of the additional verification procedures they have on their bank account. And then level up your cybersecurity insurance. If you haven't filled out a form,
we have cyber. Sure.
Yeah, I believe so, because I believe you mentioned to me
Like 3 years.
yes, if you haven't filled out, and I believe we filled out something similar to this for you guys. If you haven't filled out a form that asks you some questions about your policies and procedures when you guys handle certain situations, you probably aren't paying enough for cybersecurity. An example of cybersecurity insurance, this is like 2017, but this is kind of what it looked like. The price had gone up quite a bit since then because of the prevalence of all these attacks and things like that. But it is something to kind of regularly assess with your IT team. Let us know. Tim's kind of an expert in this stuff as well, so I can always have him take a second look. But making sure that you guys are covered in the event that something happens, because that's going to be key. Because if an event does occur, after you tell Linda, and Linda tells Intrust, the very next call that should be made is to your insurance company. We had a nonprofit that contacted us one time because they had ransomware, and they were about 3 weeks into it and just getting no progress, and they needed to get out. And we asked them if they had called their insurance yet, and they hadn't. Once the insurance got involved, they got forensics teams, the FBI involved, and things like that. But then they're also going to contact specialty lawyers and stuff like that notify you of any kind of regulations and things like that. This company dealt with HIPAA data, so they actually had to notify the Attorney General in each state where records of people in their database were from within a certain amount of days of a breach, or else you're liable for additional fines, like that. There are different regulations, things like that, to go with e-commerce and different items where it's helpful to notify them because they're going to put you in contact with people that know right away, all right, what kind of information was stolen, this is your liability, this is what you might be up against. It could be a circumstance where until you prove that it happens a certain way, you don't have to notify people, but it's helpful to know all that. So just like you get in a car crash, you call the cops and you call your insurance. If you have an incident like this, the cops are Linda, and then call your insurance and let them know what happened, all the information you have at that standpoint, and then that gives us contacts with forensics teams and stuff like that to do the deep dive investigation. They also help pay for a lot of that. So if it's additional expenses, either for interest or forensics team or things like that, it helps Aristech cover that bill. Getting down into the middle section, something that everybody can do is reducing your online exposure. Like I said before, I can go onto LinkedIn and in no time at all find out the owner of pretty much any company in the area who is in accounting at those companies and things like that. Cyber criminals do the same thing. And oftentimes what they'll do is they will send you an email that looks pretty harmless, and it might just be a generic email, a newsletter, or something like that. But what a lot of these have are called web beacons, are something that a lot of marketing teams use. They're sometimes just white text, sometimes they're embedded images. You don't even know they're there. Most of the time, they're on about 30% of emails received. But what these do is it notifies people where you're accessing it from, what kind of device you're accessing it from, what time, different things like that. Marketing teams use it to specialize the type of ad that you're seeing, type of spam emails stuff that you're getting. Cyber criminals use it so that they can get that Dave's using his iPhone in Mason to read this email. And then they send you an email that says, hey, I saw that you were accessing this dirty website from this device on this day and time. Yada, yada, yada. It would be very embarrassing if I sent the webcam footage that I took from you to all your contacts. So if you don't want it to happen, send $12,000 to me in 2 business days, or all your personal and work contacts will know what kind of buildings you're into. We see that exact email all the time. Unless you're just a really guilty person and you might have some of that going on, chances are you know it's fake. I've seen it before where that same one happens though, and there's been a third-party account breach somewhere. So you've had a Dropbox account or a LinkedIn account or a social media account that has been compromised, and they have an old password. It might not be your current password, but they'll put in there, I see your password is this. I just had it happen last week with DPO at one of my companies. It's no longer their password, but I did a dark web scan, and it did flag on it didn't tell me where it was breached, but a third-party site was breached. He used his work email address to sign up for it. He had his password, what password he uses for things, and it said, hey, I know your password. I've been accessing your things. I see what kind of filthy stuff you're into, yada, 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 keep the money. So they customize it a couple of different ways. So just because it might not be legitimate, we'll get the information in there because there could be information that leads you to where they pegged you, or look at those passwords especially to see if it's similar to the one that you're using and change your password. The biggest thing to do is to get your email address, your work email address, off the internet in as many places as possible. If you Google our CEO Tim Redding email address, he's only on 2 places, which is pretty hard for him to get off of this Who Is database. He's tried, but that's where he's at. If you Google mine, all I come up with is my name on email address isn't listed anywhere on the internet. We don't list any of our email addresses on the internet. We also don't list any type of support or info at or anything like that on our websites. And I recommend that you guys do the same. I know in the past you guys had kind of info ad on your website because it was spoofed at one point in time, and people were sending emails to clients and contacts with payment routing information from that info ad. Instead of having any published email addresses, I recommend doing kind of a form fill. So if you do want to solicit contact from your website, instead of having email us at this, it's an email button that then in browser lets them put in their email address and what they want to say to you, and it sends it through the back end. It routes that for you instead of giving any of your information that you can spoof and do that with. And just on a personal note, our is actually a NFL replay official now, but he used to be a high school referee as well, football referee.
An attorney?
Is he what?
Is he an attorney?
He's not an attorney.
They play like their attorney. More nuance.
Oh, believe me, we had a lot of fun with him every Monday. Especially on the
line, here go, let the law.
He actually, last year was his first year, and he actually got to work the Super Bowl last year, so it was pretty cool. But years ago when he was doing high school in Ohio, he was going through this and he Googled his email address and he found a database where every single Ohio high school or football official had their name, address, phone number, permit number, email address, everything that was published on a website. Somebody had meant to save this file into an internal file directory, but they probably also had some kind of SharePoint database or something that it was tied to and published it on the internet. It was since taken down, but you had hundreds of individuals that had everything minus their social security number and birthday there, that it wouldn't take somebody much to drive around and steal mail and do things like that and compromise this. So be cognizant of what personal information is out there for you individually, and also what information for your company is out there personally in terms of how people contact you. You can go to this website, Have I Been Pwned? It's owned with a P, and you can actually type in any of your email addresses, and it will tell you if you've been a part of any breaches in the past. So you can also set up notifications, and you'll get a notification if a breach occurs. The only downside is you might not know that or be notified until years after. It's an email that Tim got in 2018 notifying him of a breach on Dropbox in 2012. Because what these individuals will do is they'll breach all these accounts, they'll sell them, they'll use them, they'll do things like that. When they've used it for all it's worth or they're not the value of it anymore, then they'll brag about it and claim that they breached this amount. And the company that had the breach might not have been aware at all during that time. So it might not be real-time help, but it will at least let you know what websites that account has been breached for. So if you're using similar passwords or you're using that same password elsewhere, that you can change that. Leads to good password practices. 81% of data breaches leverage stolen and or weak. This was a Verizon, right? And so that is probably low in my opinion in terms of how many actually leverage that, because it's virtually all of them that we see. Multi-factor authentication is the number one thing these days that you can probably do. We're in the process of rolling it out for you guys. It can sometimes be annoying, but it's a lot better than the alternative. Any third-party account that offers it that you use, do it, especially if it's banking, especially if it's personal information. There's no reason these days not to. There's no reason why companies that deal in those line of businesses don't offer it either. Google offers it. Get it on your personal accounts, your personal email accounts, things like that. Set it up tomorrow. Twofactorauth.org will actually let you know companies that support MFA and the ways that they support it. So make sure that you're doing business that offer it, because at the end of the day, it's going to be the best thing. If any of you are in the next several months, suddenly start getting a bunch of prompts from the 365 MFA or the text messages, however you have it set up, for secondary login, and you've just been sitting here in the office all day, and you know that you haven't signed in on any new connections, things like that, chances are somebody's actively trying to get your account. Let them know you're getting a bunch of those. We have notification that'll alert us with suspicious ones as well, but you're going to know right then and there if somebody's trying to access it. Same with personal accounts. You're getting those notifications all the time. You know something's up. Use different passwords for every account. Pain, but you got to do it. And that doesn't mean password 1 for one account and password 2 for the next account and password 3 for the next account. And that doesn't mean when you reset the password, it doesn't mean change the 1 to a 2 and the 2 to a 3 and the 3 to a 4. That doesn't do it because a lot of you use company email to sign up for third-party websites, I'm guessing. I know you do for LinkedIn, different, especially business newsletters, things like that. Everyone does it. So you have Jack here who has his favorite fly fishing website, and he signs up for that using his aristechservices.com email address because he wants to make sure he gets those deals around Black Friday on new lures or what have you. Cybercriminal breaches that phishing website because they have security. He has Jack's Aristech Services email address, and he has that password. Jack uses that same password at Aristech Services. It's not hard to go to the 365 login page. It's the same web portal for everybody, and go to that, get those credentials, and then all of a sudden he has access to that company email server, and he's in Jack's email account.
Is our 365, can we get multi-factor authentication for that? We have that already, don't we?
Yeah, try to let it message.
Here, I'll let someone.
There you go.
So there's a few different ways you can do the multi-factor authentication.
You can just text me.
365. Yeah, you can set it up for a text. You can set it up for an app. You can set it up for a phone call.
Software from the company on the personal side.
It's not software from the company. It's an app from the Google store.
It's a 365 app. You can alternatively set it
You
up
have to,
for
put your Outlook in the, like the multi-factor authentication does not work with Microsoft now. Does it work with the text?
I think you still have to use the Outlook. I still have to use the Outlook. The Outlook app is better than all Android. I believe I have an Android. Trust me. But they get access from that third-party account, and they have access to your company email, and they're putting notification rules in place for anything that have wire, ACH, check transfer, yada, 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 and they're forwarding those emails out to a third-party email account and kind of monitoring doing that. So something completely unrelated to your work gets compromised, it does that. This is a real-life example of a contact that Tim has where he owned a property management company and had rent payments going. The individual compromised a third-party account. It was the same password for that property management. He got into there and sent new wiring information to all the tenants, and that none of them questioned it and started routing the new rent payments there to it. I think it was something like $300,000 over the course of 3 months were sent, and nobody knew about it until this landlord started going through and balancing things and realized that he hadn't been receiving payments from any of his tenants. So that kind of compounds everything in terms of shared passwords and new wiring information and verifying across the board. So use for everything. It is a pain. I know it's a pain. Use LastPass. LastPass is probably the best thing that you can do. You can premium where you can share it with individuals, so you can share it with your husbands, your wives, your kids. If you have important accounts that you guys share access to, you create one master password for the vault. And then within that vault, you can link any number of accounts you want. So your social media, your banking, your different things like that. You can generate secure passwords for it. Passwords look something like this. I don't know what a good portion of my passwords are. I never need to know what those passwords are. They look like this. It's very hard to compromise these. It was just random strings of keys. As long as I remember that one single password to the LastPass, I can get into LastPass and I can get into that vault. With that vault, there's an app that you can do. There's a web portal that you can use, and there's also browser add-ins. With those browser add-ins, if I go to my banking website, LastPass browser add-in realizes that I'm at this URL, and it asks me if I want to form fill my banking information for that. I click yes, and it fills it in. Don't do that on. It's more secure than doing it with like Google remembering your password, things like that, because that's not an encrypted database, and it's also easily compromisable. This, you're still going to have two-factor authentication on your phone, so if I do want to form fill and sign into that, LastPass is going to make me verify that I'm actually doing that. So you have the two-factor, and you also have unique secure passwords. Yes.
Does this require a social security number?
LastPass, I don't believe so.
There was one of them I looked into it, one of my social security.
I don't.
And then somebody hacks that,
Yeah.
and you're completely lost.
Yeah, I don't believe LastPass does. And to the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been any form of breach that would have happened. It's not to say that it couldn't happen, but also at the same time, if you have the two-factor authentication on the LastPass, in addition to the password vault, the chances of them compromising all your other passwords is a lot lower. And I think the risk in going this route is much, much lower than the risk of me getting one of your passwords and your work email address and trying 4 different logins and getting into it. Tim had a friend of his who he was out of town and he had his social media breached, and he had his LinkedIn, his Facebook, his Instagram, and his Twitter all used the same account and the same password for. And what the person responsible did is they posted location check-ins on Facebook over the course of a week or so from a different part of the world. And then after about a week of that, started messaging all of his contacts on social media saying that he was in this country and he had been robbed and he needed funds transferred to him and things like this. And a lot of his friends actually started to do it because they had been seeing his update posts and things like that. So they did the social engineering aspect and they sold it. And it was a nightmare for this guy and very embarrassing to go to fight everyone he knows, essentially, that every one of his accounts was compromised and bogus, and they had been taken, and things like that. So different passwords, completely random, unique passwords for everything. If it's really hard to remember them, nothing's more secure than writing them down and storing them in a safe or something like that as well. That's the easiest way to make sure that it's not going to get digitally taken, but also a lot harder to manage. Finally, backup and security. We back up all of your network data in the process of getting everybody hooked up on the OneDrive, which will also back up your local files under your 365 account as well. So those are backed up. Personal data.
Okay, thank you.
Back it up. BitLocker, Ryan also does a very good job of getting that on all your guys' computers as well. Do it on home laptops as well. It's built in with Windows 10. Just go into Control Panel and search BitLocker, and it's going to come up with this. What it does, yes.
It's a random question on your home computer. So my wife and I battle this all the time. She loves the browser open on the computer like 24/7. And I try to, no, love of God, no, and she doesn't think it's a big deal. Is it a big deal or not a big deal?
I mean, it depends. If you have a password protected account on that computer, then
Using the network like that.
to actually log onto the computer, like you have a user account. If it's just always up, and if your computer goes to sleep and you jiggle the mouse, it brings it back up on there. Okay, then it's probably not as big of a deal because they still need to put the code in to get into it. If you had a pretty simple password or something like that, then and it was logged in and it was up, and you had your last banking website website or something like that on.
Links are open.
You can definitely do that. So there's arguments on both sides for it. I would err on the side of caution,
Like
and
most mayors, there's arguments on both sides for it.
I would err on the side of caution and not leave things up. But also BitLocker on laptops. Desktops aren't as important here in the office home, maybe because it's a little bit easier to walk into a home if somebody breaks in and grab a computer and run off with it. In a business, you probably have a little bit better security, and you guys have people here a lot more than folks do. But definitely on laptops, BitLocker. What BitLocker does is it encrypts the hard drive with a BitLocker recovery key. That recovery key is something like 25 or 30 characters long, letters, numbers, capital, lowercase. Nobody's ever going to remember that. But it's any hardware changes, any physical access changes, things like that. If your laptop gets stolen and somebody tries to backdoor into the BIOS to get user account or any kind of information, without that key, it's free. All they can do is pull that hard drive out, throw it away, slap a new hard drive in, and use the shell computer and the rest of the hardware. You will get that key when you set it up, and it will be very important to write that key down and remember that key. Otherwise, if you get locked out, that computer becomes forever. We track all of your guys through, say, our Aristech, and we back them up to one of our servers as well, so that if a system isn't online for 30 days, fallen out of our system, and somebody turns it back on, that recovery key, we can provide that for you guys for your systems here. You're enabling it on your home computer, make sure you back that key up somewhere. Yes.
LastPass, you said something, like, would you be able to put that key somewhere on LastPass?
Mm-hmm.
Is that just like it's saved, like
Yep.
you get on your phone or something?
Yep, and you would just log into the LastPass phone app and search for BitLocker recovery key. You have to manually type it in. It wouldn't be form fillable like
Right.
some of your other websites, but that's 100% what LastPass is designed for. So definitely do BitLocker drive encryption on home devices as well. That way, if somebody breaks in and steals them, or if you're traveling in your laptop, you leave it in an airport or it's stolen somewhere, you have a lot of personal information that anybody that is looking for it will be able to find it likely. You don't want them to have that. It's BitLocker. Keep software updated. This gears more towards the personal aspect. We take care of it for you guys here. Most malware exploits vulnerabilities in operating systems, in third-party apps, things like that. We do your main Windows updates and security patches as well. If there's anything noteworthy that's flagged for third-party applications, sometimes they'll be like Lenovo updaters or Dell updaters or things like that we become aware of might have vulnerabilities. We immediately do scans on all of our clients' computers to see what systems have that installed and address them with you guys if it needs done. So keep apps up to date. Use endpoint protection, antivirus. Again, for you guys here, but on home personal computers, definitely use it as well. Signature-based antivirus is the best method. The way that works is think of your home and you have your door to try and decide who to let in. Some antiviruses use blacklist method, so mugshot books, so they know all the criminals that are in the malware database. So they know, hey, I'm looking for these bad guys. If I don't see any of these bad guys on this computer, then there's nothing bad on this computer. The problem with that is it's easy to change your appearance. You can put on a mustache or shave your head, shave your beard, find 3 extra chin, what have you. And criminals can do the same thing with software. They can change software so that to antivirus it looks the same, or it looks slightly different. So it's just a different file path, a different string. It does the same thing, but it makes it look different so it doesn't get detected. Whitelist method looks for known good things, but it's virtually impossible to do that. That's like you looking at your high school yearbook every time somebody comes to your door and going through and, oh, this is the class president. I know she's a really good cookie. She can come in. It's impossible to keep that up to date on all the known good software. So phones utilize both of those, and also kind of an unknown list. We are looking at a new antivirus that we are getting ready to start recommending to everybody, called Sentinel-1. We've rolled it out to a couple that have had large scale compromise and things like that. Not only does it use the whitelist and blacklist, but it also does kind of an unknown, where it closely monitors any type of new activity that does register in the database. So it looks at what that's doing, what parts of the system it's accessing, what parts of the registry it's changing, things like that, and it's monitoring it. And as soon as anything malicious is detected, it alerts us right away and blocks it from taking place until we verify it. It also takes a snapshot of the computer once it notifies this is on there. That way we can roll back the computer prior to an infection if we see something like that. The more advanced ones are better. Phones can also get viruses as well. Webroot and McAfee, what are the other ones? Norton, all of them are available on phones and computers. I do recommend using a paid version of it. You can get free versions of all of that antivirus on your personal stuff, but typically it's only running a limited scan when you force it to. It's not routinely scanning for your devices. So pay the subscription model for antivirus on personal devices as well. And finally, on your network, how vulnerable is it against ransomware infection? The harden your perimeter is pretty much the final step to it. And Accenture Security ran this in 2017 that studied the cost of cybercrime for return on investment. And they actually found that advanced perimeter controls were the least return on investment in terms of how much it costs versus what you get, because it doesn't do the whole job. It notifies you, but it prevents access, but it doesn't notify you. So think of it, on your home, you have your keys and locks to identify and protect access. You have your alarm system and video cameras to detect access, and you have the police and your insurance company to respond to the break-in. When it comes to businesses, everyone does pretty good with username and passwords, firewalls, and encryption to identify and protect access, and the data recovery and the insurance back with that to respond. The detection is the part that's often kind of in the middle ground. We have a lot that we've done with your email and things like that to detect. We are working on a solution, and I'll be bringing this to you, Linda, here shortly, called Perch, that does a really good job of detecting it. Oh, but that's where you really need to make sure that your antivirus, even stuff for personal use, systems have things where it's actively scanning hosts, traffic, things like that, to make sure that you are as actionable as possible in real time to threats, analyzing those and keeping the logs when something does happen. Knowledge is power. Don't enable macros. Don't enable macros. Don't enable macros. Use different passwords. MFA. Review all this. We'll be going over a lot of the same stuff, different stuff with the rest of the company as well. Look at your procedures and your process, and your vendors' procedures and process. That's for the people in this room, and make sure that they're holding themselves to the same standard. Communicate with clients, vendors, in terms of payment changes, things like that. Because all you can do with other companies is try to make them aware of what your aspect is. That also helps cover you, because then if you communicate that with them, that these changes are going to be communicated this way, and they do start routing payment to a third party that is intended for you, and they say, we've done this, you can go back, we have not communicated. This did not come from us. And that helps push some of that liability on them as well. Document those communications, things like that. Make sure that any new employees at those companies that might be involved in doing business transactions with that information. And as much as you can communicate to third parties to minimize your risk, the better. And again, if you have ask me after this, I can hang around for a little bit. Linda, and she can get with me or shoot me an email, and I can respond. And do you guys have any companies that you guys do business with that you think might benefit? Something like that. No spread the word. We do these cybersecurity training elsewhere as well. It helps us drum up new business, and it helps us. Our best is word of mouth, but also if we're partnered with your partners, that helps you guys know that everyone's being held to the same standard as well. So that's pretty much it. At the end of the day, remember the ABCs of cybersecurity. Always be closing your cybersecurity goals.